Hi, this is Kerry Dixon, about to submit my feedback for the Moodle MOOC 8 course on 5 webinars. A challenging task really, not only getting to understand how Moodle works, but also what WizIQ is, integrated learning is, and then also having to learn how to have a blog site on wordpress.com. So it's all been a huge learning curve at the moment. So I could not upload my feedback onto a PowerPoint because there was too much text, and it would have been very difficult. The text would have been minute, or it would have been 100 slides. So with that said, I decided to upload my feedback directly onto wordpress.com and then produce a video on here. So we have Moodle MOOC 8. The first webinar I attended was the opening ceremony on the 1st of May with Dr. Nellie Deutsch, and it was basically giving us ideas on how to get around the site, introducing participants of the course, introducing herself, and introducing other lecturers. Many of the lecturers I was unable to see owing to being in Kazakhstan and the time difference being too difficult. I didn't connect with speakers or attendees quite often because I wasn't actually in the class. I had to watch videos after their class had finished. So quite often this area is left blank. No questions arose in the initial webinar because it was just the introduction. Nothing really came to mind. And yes, I found I related to the content because I find the Moodle layout quite messy. Compared to other online teaching platforms, I find it a little bit overwhelming, I guess, and the navigation not so clear. So this was something I was hoping to fix up towards the end of the course, improve my understanding, therefore have much more grasp of how to use the program to my benefit and to students' benefit. Again, I need to spend more time going through Moodle to see how it works, and challenges in the future will be in the understanding. The second webinar was on the 10th of May with Letitia Singato, talking about Techno CLIL. CLIL I'd never even heard of before, and so of course we're going into the realm of acronyms here, something which is not necessarily a strong point for me. I like a full language, but acronyms seem to be the way of today. Discussing basically how we can incorporate digital technology, internet technology, into language learning. I would suggest it's not just language learning, it would be any sort of learning, but Letitia's focus was on second languages or foreign languages. This was quite a good lecture, gave some very good internet website recommendations, some of which we can use and some we don't really have access to because we're not a part of Europe, but didn't really make any sort of connection with attendees once again. Occasionally might have responded to what Letitia was asking with a yes or a no, but certainly I was too busy listening to her rather than watching what was going on in the chat box. It was really for me more of promoting other resources and going through a course that she attended herself at some time, so not overly informative in the end for me, except for the fact that some of the resources will be very good to research a little bit later. And this is some of the resources right here: Open Education Europa, and this inventory, which is actually a really good one if I want to work out how my students learn best and what sort of task I want them to do. Clicking on this ICT tool was a really great way of more isolating which sort of website would suit the course best. Then it went into different models to be adopted in how do we implement technology from familiarization all the way through to the evolution, which means it's obviously a continual process because technology will always change and therefore we have to change with it and grow with it. And I did actually enjoy the Bloom's taxonomy for digital platforms. I thought that was quite interesting. Once again, the challenge for me will be finding the time to learn how to master these programs and implement them into my class, and these were the websites that were recommended. The questions for my consideration were, even though like Letitia's English is amazing, I found her really, really difficult to understand. I just don't have an ear for foreign languages, unfortunately, or strong accents, and this made it very difficult for me to stay engaged in the task. The third webinar was simple techniques for making great online videos with John Orlando. This is the do's and don'ts, and I was very surprised to find out one of the don'ts is don't use bullet points. Keeping in mind different learning styles, I'm a learner who actually relies quite heavily on bullet points, so this might be a bit of a fad at the moment, don't use bullet points, but I tend to disagree and think that there is a place for bullet points, and I certainly use it in my classes when I'm trying to simplify ideas. For me, it's quite powerful. I don't think it insults the learner at all. I quite disagreed with him on this area, but that's fine. We're all quite different, and this is just the way I do things. I know that when I studied at university, I relied heavily when studying large texts on actually reducing those texts into bullet-pointed points, and it helped me to no end. So the next thing was relating to the content. It related to me quite a lot because I'm a very heavy user of PowerPoints in my classes, especially in Kazakhstan where it's a trilingual school and I'm teaching students who are using English as their third language. The first two languages being Russian first, Kazakh second, and then English as their third language. So bullet points simplify things so much for the kids. But PowerPoints certainly make it much more visual, and I do try to tailor make my PowerPoints to the class and the topic at hand. The considerations for this was, for me personally, if I'm going to be online teaching, if I'm going to be streaming a YouTube, that I must be very careful of any sort of humour because it doesn't necessarily translate well over the internet, especially if you're teaching students of other languages who might not understand my humour. So I think when it's giving tutorials, sometimes we must be very careful how we implement humour. Possible challenges with the implementation. Biggest challenge is, again, finding the time to understand all these programs, how to perfect the use of PowerPoint, how to use all the other programs that seem to have been presented to me in such a short time now. And I'm a bit surprised because I thought I was rather computer savvy. I've been using computers since they first were introduced at high school to me. I'm 49 years old, so that's, you know, a good 30 years I've been using computers, and yet I'm now struggling to keep up with just how much is out there and to use it effectively. So the second challenge is the constantly changing information and how quickly the content of the videos may become redundant. So you know, you can work really hard to create a fantastic PowerPoint, but, you know, within 6 months that information might change and become redundant. So I tend to try to make my PowerPoints very generic and very easy to edit so that the students are always getting fresh information and new information and up-to-date information. Once again, this was a really good, informative PowerPoint, a presentation on PowerPoints, and I have taken on board quite a bit of his advice. The next one, the fourth webinar, was brain and reading from the screen or paper. This I found very, very interesting because my major was in a Master's in Writing and Literature, and I had to, part of my teaching was to learn how to read text in its many formats, and text comes in the form of not only letters on a page or on a screen, but also in pictures and images, and in some ways right down to body language. So I found this quite interesting idea, but again, I disagreed with some areas of it. It was interesting to see how different other students responded differently to different types of text. And I did actually have some connection with the lecturers, with Dr. Nelly Deutsch and the other students, with some comments and some feedback, especially when discussing how the brain develops new synapses when it learns new skills. So this was a really interesting one for me, but what I didn't agree with was that how to develop focus in young students by putting those helmets on. It's very futuristic, but in actual fact, I think it weakens a student's ability to focus. We must teach students how to focus and not be easily distracted by noises around them, because they're not always going to be in a situation where they can put a helmet on. I appreciate this might have only been for a novelty or for occasionally when they want to focus on something, but my concern would be that after a while, students would only be able to focus if they had a helmet on their head. Then following on from, that was quite a large feedback session for me because it was one of quite personal interest. And then following back from that one, I think that was actually about it. That was 5. And the final webinar that I watched was Interactive Activities with Google Docs on the 29th of May with Thelma Marquis. This one I thought was really, really interesting. It didn't go long enough for me, unfortunately. I thought there was so much more that could have been done to show us the power of Google Docs. I'm not sure if it's true that only schools can open up Google classes, which would be a bit of a shame, really. So I'm going to have to look into that. That's one of my future considerations, is that true, is that not, and do a bit of research on that. The idea of doing synchronous and asynchronous activities and allowing the participants to be involved in that was really interesting, because out of all of the webinars I watched, this was the first one where I got to actually interact with what was happening on the computer, which is what all of this is about. How do we get students to interact? So it seemed to me that this was a very good idea to give us an opportunity to participate in what it is that she was talking about. And of course, you know, this content, this Google Docs relates to me a lot, because Google Drive, Google Docs, all of these things are such powerful tools now, and they give us access to all students and gives students access to their teachers as well. The challenge, once again, is always the same challenge for me, is finding the time to be able to practice and perfect the use of all of the programs that can come together into an online Moodle course, where I can benefit my students, keep tabs on my students, and my students have an opportunity to also contact me, especially as presently my students are in London and I'm probably not ever going to return to London, so I'll be in any other country in the world. So at this point, my future actions would be, yes, again, look up the Google Docs course that was mentioned by this lecturer. Apparently it's very good, and if there is somebody that can show me the way, I'm certainly keen on doing that. Well, that's the end of my feedback. Very abridged compared to the text that I've typed up about it. I have personally found the course very challenging and confusing to a certain degree, and a little bit circular. So this could be possibly my frame of mind, or that it is just going to be that I seem to clash with the layout of the course and how it all runs. But anyway, it's not that I haven't learnt. I have definitely learnt. I do know Moodle much better today than I did 30 days ago, and hopefully if I can find the time, I'll participate in the Moodle 9 and develop my skills even further and enjoy watching the process of Moodle, the program itself, evolve. Thanks very much.